On September 4th, 2025, tensions in the Caribbean reached a dangerous new height. Two Venezuelan F-16 fighter jets conducted a low-altitude pass over the USS Jason Dunham, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer of the United States Navy. The encounter took place in international waters. But Washington immediately condemned the maneuver, calling it reckless and provocative. For Caracas, it was a bold display of defiance. For the Pentagon, it was a challenge that could not be ignored. At the center of the crisis stood Venezuela's president, Nicolás Maduro. Accused by Washington of turning his nation into a narco-state and fueling international drug cartels, Maduro had ordered his air force to demonstrate that Venezuela would not be intimidated. But his gesture carried risks. The F-16s in Venezuela's inventory are aging aircraft, Cold War-era fighters delivered in the 1980s. The USS Dunham, by contrast, carried a modern Aegis combat system, capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously, and was armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles and a 5-inch deck gun. The Venezuelan flyover was not a show of strength, it was a gamble. Only 2 days earlier, the United States had struck a Venezuelan smuggling vessel suspected of running narcotics. Using precision-guided munitions, likely launched from a Seahawk helicopter or an MQ-9 Reaper drone, the US destroyed the craft, killing 11 cartel operatives. Washington described it as a decisive counter-narcotics operation. Caracas denounced it as an act of aggression. Maduro's order to buzz an American warship was, in part, retaliation. But the message it sent was far more dangerous. In response, the United States began tightening its grip. To the north, at bases in Puerto Rico, American F-35 Lightning II's deployed, fifth-generation stealth fighters designed to dominate the skies. Their arrival was no ceremonial flyover. It was a deliberate escalation, encircling Venezuela with overwhelming American air and naval power. The move signaled Washington's determination. The United States would not tolerate harassment of its forces or interference with counter-narcotics missions in the Caribbean. For Venezuela, the buzzing of a destroyer may have been a symbolic gesture, but for the US, it crossed a line. As American warships patrol the region and F-35 squadrons take up station nearby, a new standoff is emerging. In the skies above the Caribbean, aging Venezuelan Vipers now find themselves facing the most advanced combat aircraft on Earth. What began as a single flyover could ignite into a wider confrontation, one where miscalculation carries consequences not just for Venezuela, but for the entire region. The Venezuelan F-16s may have thundered in low and fast, but the USS Jason Dunham saw them long before they appeared over the horizon. Equipped with the Aegis combat system, the destroyer can detect, track, and engage targets hundreds of miles away. To the sailors aboard, the approaching fighters were no surprise. They were simply waiting, watching the radar screens as the blips grew closer. The American warship was ready. Locked within its vertical launch cells were SM-2 surface-to-air missiles, long-range weapons capable of intercepting enemy aircraft with precision. Other options included the RIM-160U evolved Sea Sparrow missile, designed to engage agile, high-speed targets. Together, these systems gave the destroyer the ability to swat hostile aircraft from the sky as easily as an insect. But on September 4th, the order to fire never came. The F-16s roared past, and the Dunham held its fire. The provocation was noted, but the response was restrained. Behind the scenes, however, discussions in Washington grew increasingly tense. Reports indicate that later that day, President Trump authorized new rules of engagement. Commanders at sea were given far clearer instructions. If Venezuelan jets repeated the stunt, they could be engaged without hesitation. For US forces, that meant the next flyover could end very differently. By September 5th, those orders were in place. Any hostile maneuver by Venezuelan aircraft near US assets in international waters would be met with force. And yet, the naval threat was only one piece of the equation. Enter the F-35 Lightning II. Deployed to Puerto Rico, the stealth fighters dramatically altered the balance of power. Unlike Venezuela house-aging F-16A and B models, acquired from the United States in the early 1980s, the F-35 represented the cutting edge of fifth-generation warfare. Its radar cross-section is nearly invisible to conventional tracking. Its sensor fusion provides unmatched situational awareness, and its weapon systems can strike before an adversary even knows it is being targeted. Venezuela's Vipers, once among the most advanced fighters of their era, were now hopelessly outmatched. Many are believed to be poorly maintained, with questions surrounding their airworthiness and combat readiness. Armed primarily with AIM-9L Sidewinders, short-range, heat-seeking missiles from the late Cold War, these aircraft could still maneuver sharply in a dogfight. But against stealth jets, guided by superior sensors and backed by a network of US surveillance assets, their odds of survival were vanishingly small. The message was clear. Venezuela could buzz a US destroyer once, but a second attempt would be answered decisively, either by the Aegis systems of a Navy warship or by the most advanced fighter aircraft on Earth. The confrontation was escalating from a symbolic gesture to a potential military showdown, one that could ignite the Caribbean in a matter of minutes. The Venezuelan F-16s, known as Vipers, are not without teeth. Capable of speeds exceeding Mach 2, they can be equipped with AIM-9 Sidewinders, and in theory, the more advanced AIM-20 AMRAAM. They also carry the M61 Vulcan cannon, a 20mm rotary gun that once made them formidable opponents in aerial combat. In the 1980s, these capabilities placed the Viper at the forefront of global air power. But 4 decades later, time has not been kind to Venezuela's fleet. Without consistent upgrades, many of the aircraft now lack modern radar systems and advanced avionics. Their maintenance record is questionable, their readiness uncertain. Analysts estimate that perhaps 10 to 24 remain operational. For the Venezuelan pilots who flew low over the USS Jason Dunham, the mission was loud, visible, and defiant. Yet their endurance was limited. Venezuela possesses no aerial refueling capability, meaning its fighters are forced to operate close to home bases, often pushing the limits of their fuel reserves. In stark contrast stands the F-35 Lightning that se suena. 2. America Restet. Stealth fighter is not just an aircraft. It is a networked platform designed to dominate the modern battlefield. Its low observable coatings and carefully engineered airframe render it nearly invisible to radar. Its distributed aperture system provides pilots with a seamless 360-degree view of the battle space, as though equipped with X-ray vision. The F-35 does more than see. It connects. Through advanced sensor fusion, it links satellites, ships, and other aircraft into a unified kill web, sharing targeting data instantly across the force. Armed with AIM-9X Sidewinders, AIM-120 AMRAAMs, and precision-guided munitions, the Lightning II possesses the ability to strike with lethal speed and accuracy. The disparity is staggering. A single F-35 could, in theory, eliminate Venezuela's remaining air force before breakfast, and it could do so without ever being detected. Consider the scenario. Venezuelan F-16s roar toward another US destroyer, confident in their show of defiance. 60 miles away, an American F-35 tracks them silently through infrared sensors, its radar painting them without ever revealing its own presence. Before the Venezuelan pilots even realize they are being hunted, missiles are in the air. The outcome is preordained. In this confrontation, Venezuela's aging Vipers are little more than relics, a paper tiger attempting to roar. The F-35s now deployed to Puerto Rico are predators, unseen and unmatched, poised to sweep the skies clean should a second provocation occur. For Nicolas Maduro, the gamble of buzzing a US destroyer may have appeared bold. But against the reality of American fifth-generation air power, it is a gesture doomed to collapse in the face of overwhelming superiority. Documentary narration script, extended. For Venezuela's aging F-16s, the stakes have changed dramatically. This confrontation is no longer simply about fighter jets and air power. It is about the survival of Nicolas Maduro's regime itself. Washington views Venezuela not merely as a regional rival, but as a narco-state, deeply entangled with transnational cartels. Groups like the Tren de Aragua move narcotics through Venezuelan territory, fueling a flood of fentanyl into the United States. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has placed a $50 million bounty on Maduro himself, accusing him of direct involvement in drug trafficking operations. Venezuela's ports, airfields, and even military installations have become transit hubs for cartel activity. The destruction of a smuggling speedboat earlier this month was not just a tactical strike, it was a direct blow to the financial lifeline of Maduro, Bixtes. Venezuelan government. Each shipment funds the apparatus of his rule. The flyover of the USS Jason Dunham was his attempt to bark back, to show defiance in the face of mounting pressure. But for Washington, the patience has ended. The arrival of the F-35s in Puerto Rico is not symbolic. It is strategic encirclement. 10 Lightning IIs, 4 of them forward deployed to Roosevelt Roads Naval Base, now sit less than 500 miles from Caracas. From this position, they can dominate the Caribbean skies, surveil Venezuelan airspace, and intercept threats before they ever approach U.S. naval assets. The broader question lingers: is regime change now on the table? For Maduro, it is an existential fear. He knows that the collapse of his hold on power could mean exile or capture. He will go to any length to preserve it. So, what is Washington's true objective? Analysts describe a strategy of maximum pressure. Militarily, it is deterrence, ensuring that any hostile move by Venezuelan forces would be met with an overwhelming and immediate response. Economically, it is strangulation. Sanctions have already crippled Venezuela's oil exports, once the foundation of its economy. Now, U.S. forces are targeting the drug routes that supply Maduro's remaining streams of revenue. The regime's financial resources are dwindling, perhaps reduced to only a few $100 million a month, a shadow of its former wealth. Politically, the message is unmistakable. To Russia, China, and Iran, states that have courted Caracas as a strategic ally, the United States is signaling that the Caribbean remains firmly within Washington's sphere of influence. But Venezuela is not entirely passive. In response to U.S. deployments, its Navy has begun sending vessels to shadow American warships. Drones, many of them Iranian-made, are being launched in attempts to threaten U.S. patrols. Caracas believes these unmanned systems could serve as an asymmetric answer to the vastly superior firepower of the U.S. Navy. Yet against a fleet armed with Aegis destroyers, advanced electronic warfare suites, and combat-tested defenses against both missiles and drones, Venezuela's countermeasures are unlikely to alter the balance. The encirclement is tightening. For Maduro, the window to maneuver politically or militarily is shrinking. For Washington, the message is clear. The Caribbean will not be surrendered, and the cost of defiance will only rise. For Venezuela's F-16 pilots, the pressure is immense. Their aging aircraft are no match for America's fifth-generation stealth fighters. Even they must wonder whether drones, rather than manned jets, should be sent on future provocations. But Washington's playbook is already clear. The United States intends to strike hard, intimidate Maduro's regime, and dismantle its narco financing networks. The pattern is unmistakable. The destruction of a cartel speedboat was not simply a tactical interdiction, it was a signal, a calculated act of brinkmanship. Analysts compared it to the 2020 strike on Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, which demonstrated that Washington was willing to eliminate key figures it deemed threats. Now, by targeting cartel logistics tied to Maduro himself, the United States is sending a similar message. No safe haven, no impunity. An invasion of Venezuela is not underway. But through selective strikes and the deployment of overwhelming air power, Washington is demonstrating that Maduro's options are narrowing, and his margin for survival is shrinking. Every smuggling route, every cartel aircraft, and every act of defiance at sea or in the air will now be met with force. Here, the role of the F-35 is central. Traditionally designed for deep strike and interdiction, the Lightning II now adapts its capabilities to counter-narcotics missions. Its advanced AN/APG-81 radar and electro-optical targeting system allow it to detect cartel boats or low-flying aircraft from up to 50 miles away, day or night. At 40,000 feet, it can monitor light aircraft, Cessnas, Beechcraft, and business jets that cartels have long used to ferry narcotics across borders. This aerial smuggling often exploits civilian traffic. Small jets can rendezvous with larger airliners, commercial flights bound for US cities, masking their movements in crowded airspace. Fourth-generation fighters like the F-16 or F-15 would struggle to identify these subtle anomalies. The F-35, however, integrates data from satellites, ships, and ground sensors to expose even the faintest signatures. The possibilities are stark. A business jet suspected of carrying narcotics could, in theory, be intercepted and destroyed mid-flight. A cartel freighter could be annihilated with a precision-guided bomb before its crew realized they were being tracked. The F-35's arsenal ranges from air-to-air missiles to 500-pound JDAMs to its 25mm cannon, capable of obliterating targets on land, sea, or in the air. This is a new form of warfare. Dawn patrols may interdict drug planes. Night operations could hunt semi-submersible narco-subs slipping out of jungle rivers. Stealth loitering missions might shadow cartel airstrips deep inside South America, relaying targeting data to Navy destroyers or Coast Guard aircraft. From Puerto Rico, the F-35s can be airborne in minutes, reaching Venezuelan territory in less than an hour. With tanker support, they can remain on station indefinitely, weaving an unbroken surveillance and strike network, a true kill web across the Caribbean. Consider, too, the scenario of escalation. Should Venezuelan F-16s attempt another flyover, perhaps even carrying ordnance, American rules of engagement now authorize a decisive response. If the confrontation closes to visual range, the outcome is nearly predetermined. The stealthy F-35s would detect and track the Vipers long before they were seen, positioning themselves invisibly. At the merge, helmet-mounted displays would cue weapons instantly, launching AIM-9X Sidewinders or unleashing the 25mm cannon. Against this combination of stealth, sensors, and maneuverability, Venezuela's fighters would have no chance. But this standoff is about more than air combat. It is about breaking Venezuela's narco backbone. The United States is applying pressure on multiple fronts. F-35 patrols from Puerto Rico, Navy destroyers, and submarines at sea, sanctions strangling oil revenue, and intelligence operations targeting cartel supply chains. It is a siege, economic, military, and political. For Maduro, the choices are stark. He can back down, cutting ties with cartel operations and losing the revenue that sustains his regime. Or he can escalate, risking confrontation with a vastly superior American force. Should he choose escalation, Venezuela's S-300 air defenses and MiG-29 fighters offer only temporary resistance. U.S. stealth aircraft can bypass or neutralize them. Carrier strike groups, armed with Tomahawk missiles and supported by Marines, could dismantle critical bases within hours. And yet, the dangers remain. Russia, China, or Iran could respond with advisors, weapons, or intelligence support, transforming Venezuela into the latest proxy battleground. Maduro himself could attempt to rally anti-American sentiment, casting himself as a victim of imperialism. For now, Washington is tightening the screws, applying relentless pressure until cracks begin to show. More F-35 patrols, more naval interdictions, more economic isolation. The Caribbean has become a tinderbox, and in the center of it all, the F-35 is the match. Its afterburners glowing in the night sky, ready to ignite a conflict that could spread far beyond Venezuela's shores.